That's the kind of leader our service members deserve. One who understands the risks they face and who would actually protect them by doing his job as commander-in-chief. Instead, they have a coward-in-chief who won't stand up to Vladimir Putin, read his daily intelligence briefings, or even publicly admonish adversaries for reportedly putting bounties on our troops' heads. As president, Joe Biden would never let tyrants manipulate him like a puppet. He would never pervert our military to stroke his own ego.
That is, of course, Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois speaking at the Democratic National Convention last night. She is a retired U.S. Army lieutenant colonel who flew missions as a helicopter pilot in the Iraq War. She's also a recipient of the Purple Heart. Senator Duckworth, thanks so much for being with us this morning. We saw last night Joe Biden echoing a sentiment you just delivered right there. I think he probably was at his angriest in that speech, if there was a moment of anger, when he talked about the alleged Russian bounties on American troops inside Afghanistan. You talked about that last night. What do you think it tells you about President Trump as a commander-in-chief that he was not willing to bring that up on phone calls repeatedly with Vladimir Putin?
Well, he's a failed commander-in-chief in my book. Any commander-in-chief knows, any commander knows that you put your troops first, and this president has continually put Russia and Vladimir Putin's orders first before the well-being of his troops. He's not a commander. He's failed. He's failed in the most basic of his duties.
So, Senator, some critics of Joe Biden, when they look at his long record on foreign policy, point to his vote on the Iraq War. Of course, he's not alone in voting for that war among Democrats. What do you make of his foreign policy career generally? Do you view him as an interventionist, or do you view him as something else? How do you look at his foreign policy?
Well, I think at this point in our nation, where Donald Trump has turned us almost into a pariah among nations, turning our backs on our allies, walking away from international accords and agreements and associations, I think that Joe Biden's long history and expertise in foreign affairs is really going to help our nation regain its place in the world and regain not just the trust, but our leadership role that is sorely needed on a global stage. So I think that having Joe Biden in the White House will actually allow America to lead the free world as we used to do, instead of being a nation that is scorned by our former allies.
On so many levels, I completely understand how you feel and what you are saying, Senator. But I think right now we have a large portion of the country that doesn't hear any of this, doesn't want to hear, is tuned out, and is voting for Trump. So how do you and how do we, those who are worried about our democracy, compel them to open their minds and perhaps see things from a different point of view? Because your comments make a lot of sense, but I don't think it's getting to the folks who are voting for Trump. I don't think they're hearing you.
Well, I think that the members of our military are hearing me, those that did vote for Trump, because they are appalled that he would use the military against Americans who are peacefully exercising their democratic, constitutionally guaranteed rights. That part of my speech was directly aimed at the military because they know that the military is a part of American institution that needs to be apolitical. The other thing I think Joe Biden did himself last night was he spoke to Americans who were struggling across this country. Mm-hmm. It's not about whether you voted for Trump or not. If you are right now struggling because somebody in your family is out of a job and you may not be able to make that next rent payment or that mortgage payment, all the parents out there are terrified of this decision that they have to make. Do I send my child back to school and potentially face a global deadly pandemic, or do I keep them at home and then face potentially them falling behind in school? I'm faced with that own choice myself. And so we have to speak to people where they are. And Americans are struggling and hurting across this great nation. And we have to tell them that there's a way out of this crisis, and Joe Biden will lead them.
Katty Kay.
Senator, there are 70-odd days to go. And just going into this convention, we've seen the polls tightening just a little bit. The Republicans next week are going to have their chance to dominate the airwaves and get their attention. Just in terms of this election race and where it stands right now, what is it that what worries you? What keeps you up at night?
What keeps me up at night is the Postal Service. Donald Trump has done everything he can to undermine mail-in voting. You know, I voted by mail from Iraq in a combat zone. It was good enough for our troops in a combat zone. It's good enough for all of us. And Donald Trump has tried to undermine this election. And now we see that even though the Postal Service says that they are putting the machines back and then they're not going to try to slow down the mail, now we see this morning, we wake up to news that in fact, the Postal Service has issued orders to their mail facilities not to put the high-speed mail sorting machines back into service. And so we see a real determined effort by the Trump administration to undermine a very basic fundamental rights of all Americans, and that is the ability to vote.
All right, Senator Tammy Duckworth, thank you so much for being on the show this morning.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.